Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us during your lunch hour. It is our pleasure to be part of this parenting webinar series hosted by EtonHouse and eBridge in collaboration with the Southwest Community Development Council, SWCDC. We look forward to sharing our experiences with bilingualism in the next hour. Before we start, let us take a group photo. Please turn on your camera and keep smiling. Let's turn on our camera and 3, 2, 1, say cheese. Maybe we'll try one more time. 3, 2, 1, cheese. Is it all good? Okay, thank you so much. Okay, now let's begin. We have received quite a number of questions on today's topic. Thank you to those who have already submitted your questions. We will be addressing as much as we can in the course of the hour. But if we do not manage to get to your questions, or if you need some clarifications, do type them in the chat, and we will be responding to them after the webinar or in an article after the session today. We would like to request for you to mute yourself to minimize any disruptions unless you have a question or experience to share with us during the Q&A session. Without further ado, we would like to start by introducing ourselves. My name is Natalie Loh, and I have been with EtonHouse for the past 10 years. And I'm currently a principal at EtonHouse Bilingual Preschool along Upper Bukit Timah Road, opposite the Bukit Timah Nature Reserve. We offer a bilingual foundation to children from 18 months all the way to 6 years of age. I am a strong believer of the Reggio Emilia approach, which is an inquiry-based approach to education. Apart from being an educator, my other full-time job is being a mother to my almost 2-year-old son, and I'm expecting one more in a few months' time. I'll let Suwai introduce herself.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today, especially during your precious lunchtime. So I have been in the early childhood sector for about 17 years. I am currently a center leader at eBridge Punggol Large Childcare Center. I have been with eBridge for the past 2 years, and at eBridge, we aim to offer a program which lays a strong foundation for children, not only for bilingualism, but we also, look into all walks of life. I'm also a mother of 2 girls, aged 4 and 6 this year. I strongly believe in building strong foundation of bilingualism and its benefits. I will share with you a little bit more later about my personal experiences as well, together with Natalie. With this, we are going to start off by sharing a little bit about what language development is all about and what are the benefits of bilingualism. Natalie?
So speaking and understanding more than one language presents many opportunities and connects to numerous cognitive, social, emotional advantages. And being able to speak in Mandarin myself, I have been able to communicate with friends, family, stakeholders at work who are solely Mandarin speaking. And I've also been able to communicate with locals in countries where Mandarin is predominantly spoken. Been able to translate for other people conversationally at work. And this skill has given me personally a wider perspective on the world and culture. But when children are able to use different languages to express themselves with ease and with confidence in different social groups and settings, it has proven to be extremely beneficial in helping them build and maintain social connections. These children not only build a better sense of identity and belonging, but it also encourages empathy and a greater social understanding. While it is always advocated to start learning a second language at an early age, we must remember that a child is never too young to learn a second language. And we know that the exposure to a new language in a child's formative years is extremely crucial in establishing that literacy foundation. And we all know that preschool children learn new things a lot quicker with deep understanding. Yes, so maybe you can share a bit more about
Thank you, Natalie. So having to be able to speak in more than one language definitely promotes communication skills and confidence in speaking and interacting with the people around us. So there are studies or articles that often discuss and acknowledge that how being bilingual is a significant advantage, as it helps to create possibilities in having more diverse career options and opportunities as well. So, and then another benefit of bilingualism is that it helps in preparation for primary school. As we support to develop children's language at early years, it helps to build a strong foundation in listening, speaking, early reading skills. So when children transit to primary school, they will find it much more manageable to cope in learning the language further in primary school. So as we talk more about developing bilingualism, Natalie and I will be sharing with you about the different learning models in school as well.
And there are many different learning models in schools to develop bilingualism. We're going to discuss what these models look like and what we think it's the most effective. And when we talk about the most efficient way to learn a language, we always hear words such as bilingual environment or immersion, and these are always the words that pop up. And I will be sharing an overview of these two models, the immersion model and the bilingual model. So the immersion model is where two language groups, native and non-native speakers, are in the same setting. And you will also have the native language teachers in these settings, and the children get to interact with these teachers in that language over a sustained period of time. Whereas in a bilingual environment, it's where you have two different native language teachers in this setting. And children interact with these teachers in their respective languages. And this allows children to learn from one another and scaffold their skills and competencies in both the languages. And these are just some of the several models that are available in schools that enable children to pick up the language skills, whether or not they are native language learners. So we have to remember that what's best for your child may not be best for another child. And the journey towards picking up a language skill as your mother tongue, or whether you are acquiring it as a second language, is unique to the child's context, and also their home language environment. So in our EtonHouse schools, the language models are responsive to the individual learner and are offered from preschool all the way to primary school and beyond. And this is very important because we know that children then have a pathway towards gaining language proficiency as they progress and become more competent and confident in the language. So no matter what the model or the process of learning is, the thinking and values that underpin it must be aligned. And it is informed by research and best practice that children learn a language in a natural and a spontaneous process by using language in everyday life and situations where they can easily and instinctively switch between languages. So whether it is a single language immersion or a bilingual environment, both of which are offered in our schools, children pick up the language skills in an authentic way. So parents can choose either based on their child's learning style, future schooling options, the language spoken at home, your expectations on the language outcomes, and your child's interest in learning the language, amongst many other factors. And to give you an example of a bilingual classroom in my school, there will always be an English and a Mandarin teacher in every class at all times. And children get to interact with both the language teachers for the entire day. And both English and Mandarin are used in natural everyday settings, like during morning greetings when you come to school, conversations during meal times, and other routines throughout the day. Additionally, there are also allocated slots in the timetable where children have pockets of language immersion periods. And this is when the learning in one language is facilitated by either the English or Mandarin speaking teacher. And it takes place during that particular time. This could be during meeting times or small group inquiry times. And during these sessions, depending on the child's learning outcomes, the teachers will be able to differentiate the learning so that each child is building on their competencies in the language from simple to complex.
Thank you, Nat. So as what Natalie shared, there are indeed different learning models available in schools that enable children to pick up language skills. So for eBridge, very similar to EtonHouse, we have both English and Mandarin language teachers throughout the day. So children converse in languages every day during different point of time throughout the day, routines, conversations, transitions, playtime, meal times. So we also have a timetable where there are specific time and activities for children to learn either with the English or Mandarin teacher. So for eBridge, we are centered on the belief that all children are strong and competent, capable learners who are full of wonder and curiosity. So hence, early literacy behaviors such as listening, speaking, reading, and writing are very much facilitated through purposeful materials and socially supported experiences in both languages, English and Mandarin. So with these, Natalie and I will share with you more about the strategies adopted by educators when it comes to learning language in school. So for eBridge, as shared earlier, we are centered on the belief that all children are strong, competent, and capable learners. So one of the strategies that educators often adopt is to support children's learning and support children's interests. We take a child-directed approach instead of a teacher-directed approach. So with the belief in co-constructing learning experiences with them, it helps in developing the bilingualism as we sustain their interest in learning too. So making learning the language interesting and meaningful is very important. Another strategy teachers adopt is facilitating through intentional planning of experiences and providing purposeful materials in the environment. EtonHouse and eBridge views the school learning environment as a third teacher. Natalie and I will be sharing with you further about the learning environment and experiences that supports bilingualism. So in eBridge, the environment plays an important role in honoring the image of the child as it encourages exploration and independent learning. So in addition to a variety of learning experiences such as stories, games, fun ways, and discussion with children, in the classroom, there are different provocations and materials that support children to learn independently or with teachers' facilitation. So through this whole process, it definitely supports learning the language. Let me share with you a few examples of the learning space across different eBridge center. I will now share the screen. Just give me 1 minute to toggle. Are you able to see my screen? Let me just put it on a slide for you. Okay, so are you able to see? Okay, so we look into the different cultures such as Chinese culture in learning as well. And with a variety of authentic materials as seen on the picture on the right, for example, these authentic materials encourages children to explore and hence learning the language through the experiences. So this is also another good example that how I mentioned earlier, we weave into looking into the different culture to invite children to explore further, to learn about the culture, to learn about the language. So children were also invited in setting up the learning spaces. So for instance, let's say, as you see in the picture on the right, children were invited to write the different words they have learned as part of the learning, as part of the learning space. Teachers also ensure in providing a pre-rich environment that supports bilingualism across all levels. So for instance, in different learning spaces, labels are in both languages. Children were also involved in writing and labeling the different items or activities in the learning space in both languages. So I believe EtonHouse adopts similar strategies as well. I will then now invite Natalie to share with us more.
Thanks for sharing the photos of your school environment, Sai. I can tell that the environment is a rich canvas, for children to develop their interests and skills in learning the different languages. And I agree that children thrive in the environment that they are put into. And that is why the school environment is detrimental to children's development. So at EtonHouse, similar to eBridge, we do view the learning environment as our third teacher, as what Suai mentioned earlier. So when you walk in, as parents, you can envision that it should be one that is welcoming. It promotes relationships, communication, collaboration, and is responsive to the children's needs. And you will be able to find that a child in EtonHouse will have their voices heard and valued. And in this way, children get to gain more confidence in becoming more willing to use the language. So apart from the environment, teachers being able to provide their students with opportunities to feel secure, to feel accepted is vital to children's success, right? So they need to have that confidence, they need to feel safe and secure in the environment. Children should be able to converse freely, to enjoy and share experiences with their friends, to be able to use the language and express themselves confidently, even in instances where they were to make mistakes. So making mistakes is okay, and children need to be comfortable with that. And I find that it's also important to make learning the language interesting and meaningful by being an intentional teacher. So this is when the materials, the experiences, the resources that we lay out and present in the classroom and environment come into play. When we provide experiences and materials to the children, it should be culturally represented. So at EtonHouse, the Chinese culture is highly valued and very evident in our classrooms and shared learning spaces. And these Chinese traditions go way back into our roots and how the language came about. And children do have the opportunities to engage in Chinese calligraphy, to participate in the different festivals, and all of which is to invite both the native and the non-native speakers to be part of the experience and to develop a love and appreciation for the language. So now I have a video to share about some of the Chinese cultural experiences that we have conducted at EtonHouse. So I hope that you enjoy the video. We hope that you enjoyed watching the video. So just to do a little bit of sharing about what you have just seen. So you would see that the children had plenty of experiences to do with Chinese painting or Chinese calligraphy. And these are our K2 children that has worked on Chinese calligraphy for the entire year. And even actually published a book after that to document their learning and experiences in appreciation for Chinese calligraphy. And the video proceeded, and you actually did see the study of Chinese tea. So the children were studying the different tea leaves. They were brewing tea and making tea packages as well, to be given out to children who visited this little provocation and learning studio that they have created throughout the year. So maybe now, Suai, we can proceed to the poll.
Eunice, will you be able to help us with that?
So everybody, we do understand from you that that there are many challenges that you face when you are cultivating bilingualism at home. And you will see on the poll on your screen, there are some of the challenges that we do know are tough, and we would like you to select the challenge that you observed at your own home. And we welcome you to share any other challenges inside the Zoom chat. So please take this time to just put in your option. In the meantime, Suai, maybe you can share a little bit about some of the personal challenges that you face in raising your two children at home and cultivating bilingualism.
Sure. So while waiting for the rest of the parents to choose their biggest challenge, I will share with you, all of you, mine. So like I shared earlier, I strongly believe in speaking Mandarin since young. So, but when I had my first child, I failed to do so. That was my biggest challenge because I have to engage a helper. So mainly speaking in English, for instance. So I have to start slow. Probably when my second child came along, then I very much emphasized in speaking Mandarin, because I had a discussion with my husband. If I begin speaking Mandarin with my elder girl, for instance, then there will be a language barrier for my helper, who is really very new, and English is the primary language. So that was one of my biggest challenge when I, begin starting to speak to my girls in Mandarin as well. Yeah. So okay, let's take a look at the polling results. Okay. Looks like we all have most parents have selected. Okay, let's look at the proficient level of parents speaking the second language first. So I will stop the polling and let me just share. Are you able to see the results as well? Yes. Okay. All right. So let's look at the first challenge then when it comes to proficient level of parents speaking the second language. To begin with, I think we must first be a role model. We must first take a keen interest in learning together with them, cultivate a very positive attitude towards learning. We have to show the children that we are making an effort to learn with them. So for instance, my husband is not proficient in reading Mandarin. He has tried very hard in attempting to read Chinese storybooks. So it is a routine for myself and my girls and my husband, bedtime stories. So very naturally, we'll pick up books to read. So the girls knows that I would, the Chinese storybook goes to me, the English one goes to my husband. So, but along the way, we picked up, we realized that we have to be the role model. So my husband, over the time, will demonstrate interest, saying that, okay, let's read Chinese book with you. Then thereafter, over the time, my girls notice that, hey, daddy is learning together with me as well. So I also have a friend, another close friend, who doesn't speak Mandarin since young. Till now, she is also struggling as a mother. However, she acknowledged that her effort in learning Mandarin together with her son, who is P1 this year, has really helped in keeping her son's interest in learning too. So don't worry about the proficient level of speaking the second language. There are really also very good resources out there, good books out there in popular bookstore. There are dual language books in both Mandarin or in English in the storybooks. So there are also online resources such as bilingualism.sg. It provides interesting resources supported by Lee Kuan Yew Fund for Bilingualism on different platforms, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram as well. So there are really many resources available to support you in learning the language with your child. So despite you are not proficient in speaking the second language. So most importantly, you need to enjoy the learning with them. Yeah.
And we do see that the top challenge in the poll is children are not interested in picking up a second language. And that makes up to almost 50% of everybody here who voted. So we do know that you are not alone. There are many other households who face the same challenge in children who are simply not interested in picking up a second language, whether is it your mother tongue, is it Chinese, or is it English. And we do know that the home environment plays a very important role in building up encouragement, respect, and interest in learning a language, right? So if you don't speak the language, you know, it's a bit more challenging for the children to do it because the home environment is just not built up for that. But if you do speak the language, children will naturally feel more comfortable in using the language. Okay, so if you don't speak the language, don't worry, because there are some ways that parents can be supportive of their child's effort to learn a language. You know, and it can be done through offering praises when the children attempt to use the language in small ways, you know, expressing awe at the new words that they learn. And one thing that Suai mentioned earlier, it's also making sure that you engage them in meaningful activities. And that's something that I find myself doing a lot with my son. You know, doing activities that are of interest to them. So for example, if your child enjoys going outdoors or enjoys cooking or baking, you know, engage in such bonding activities with them, and try to use that second language to, you know, entice them to speak the language a little bit more. So it's important that parents understand that they do not need to be linguists to aid their children in language development. You know, but simply offering them a caring and encouraging environment, even a good book to snuggle up with, a good routine, showing enthusiasm for learning the language, you are already helping a very big deal. Yeah. So let's see if there are other people in the chat that have mentioned some of the challenges. So are you able to see?
Yes, I am. There is a question from the chat room. It says that we are English Malay speaking family. How to assist our kids to pick up Mandarin? So that will be one of the questions that we'll be also sharing in details, because we have managed to pick up one of the questions from upon registration. We have gathered a few questions that we'll also be unpacking with you. Yeah. There's another one.
Sorry, I don't know why I'm not able to see the responses inside the chat.
Yeah, I'm toggling as well. So probably we can just move on to the questions that we have gathered, the few questions that we gathered upon registration.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, is it true that it is easier to pick up English along the way? If so, should we communicate with children using Mandarin from young? Yes, it is true that it is easier to pick up English along the way. Most of the children has, showed that. So across the years, working with different families, for instance, even in my loved ones, my friends around me, for instance, my family grew up in a my brothers speak Hainanese since young. And for myself, we speak mainly Mandarin at home. But along the years, we picked up. And I have seen how different families who strongly believe in speaking second mother tongue language at home, they pick up the English along the way with a few reasons. For instance, because in the childcare context or in a different context, most of the times we probably begin speaking in English first. So it is true that it's probably easier to pick up English along the way, but of course we need to also work very closely with the teachers to see and closely work with your children to see how they are picking up the language as well, to ensure we support them in learning as well. Yeah, so it is true that it's easier to pick up English along the way. So with the second question, let's see.
Second question is, do we force the child to use the language we prefer as their primary language? And at what age does the child understand the difference? So I would say we have come to the day and age where children have a mind of their own. And as parents and also educators, we encourage independent thinking. So before we encourage bilingualism, in our family, it is important for us as parents to understand the motivation behind why we want our children to be bilingual, or and the motivation behind why children want to pick up a language can be very different from why we want them to pick it up. So maybe children at school may come to realize that, if they don't speak a language, they may not be able to converse with certain friends or certain social groups of friends. Whereas some parents may think that they might lose out on opportunities in life in the future if they're not being able to speak more than one language. So rather than forcing children to learn a new language, it is important to find out what motivates your child to learn and then build upon them to keep them engaged. So for me growing up, I grew up in a predominantly speaking English family. My father learned Malay when he was young because we are Peranakan. So there was a lot of different languages because I took Chinese as my second language at school. But my motivation behind learning the language was very different from why my parents wanted me to pick up the language, because that was like a necessity. Everybody went through that rite of passage through primary school in our local system, and you have to just learn the language. And we know sometimes when learning Mandarin, it can be very rigorous and it can be very didactic when it comes to learning. And the motivation just wasn't there. But of course, as I progressed in my years and coming into the line that I'm in, I do realize how important it is for me to speak a second language. And so you start to harness that kind of interest, not as a child, but when you are actually an adult. And I would say that it is never too late, because now it's not just learning how to speak the language. It's not just learning to converse with people. It's learning to appreciate the language, which I have seen from the many Mandarin teachers that have come through the doors at EtonHouse Bilingual Preschool. Because you start to understand, how did the language come about, through Jiahu Wen, or you can do a lot more by having a Chinese calligraphy, or learning about the She Shen Xiao, the different zodiacs as well. So those are good anchor points for us as parents and educators and parents to understand why it's important for children to pick up the language and to motivate them along the way. So to the second question, as to what age do children understand the difference between the different languages? This is how I understand the question. So when children walk through the doors into our preschools as young as 18 months or 17 months, they are able to already tell the differences between the languages. And this can be evident when we set up different experiences for the children at school. They are able to tell and respond to the teachers who speak different languages. So English and a Mandarin teacher, they are able to respond in different ways. And it is a very natural way, because the Mandarin teacher only gives instructions in Mandarin, and the English teacher only communicates in English, and the children will be able to know how to switch instinctively and naturally between both the languages. So I know of 20-month-old toddler who speaks both English and Mandarin in school as well as at home. But when he goes to his grandparents, he's able to also pick up a third language like Hokkien, and he's able to use such vocabulary also at school. So that when children are exposed, even at a young age, they are able to tell apart the different languages and use that language to communicate with certain with certain people that have spoken to them before. Okay.
Another question. How to teach more than 2 languages at the same time? Should one parent speak English and another speak Mandarin to the child? Many times it didn't materialize. Sorry. So day-to-day conversation is one of the ways to introduce the 2 languages at the same time. And one of the way would be having one parent speaking English and another speak Mandarin to the child, or both parents speak 2 languages at the same time. So it really takes time for all of us to be able to see our efforts pay off, to see the progression in picking up the language. So it may take 1 to 2 years, it builds on. So for instance, earlier I shared one of my biggest challenge when despite I strongly believe in speaking Mandarin since young, I had my challenge. So it took my elder child a little while longer, probably by the age 3 or 4, then I see her in speaking Mandarin a lot more confidently compared to my younger one, because since as young as infant, we started to speak to her in Mandarin. So it really takes time to see how the children will pick up the language along the way. And if we are looking at teaching more than 2 languages at the same time, day-to-day conversation, music, the children's interest, like we both shared earlier, is very important. It will play a part. For instance, let's say my girls and many families that I work with, simple vocab in Malay, for instance, my girls know what is takut. It means scared, and because it's gathered or learned through the day-to-day conversation that I had with her, and she loves songs. So through Encik Encik Semut, they also learn through that songs what is it all about. So at the end of the day, it is really to monitor your children's interest closely and see how we can weave into, introducing the language to them. So day-to-day conversation and their interest is one of the best way to introduce the language to them.
To add on to what Suai has mentioned, I think when my son was born, this was the arrangement that both my husband and I had. For me to speak in English, and then my husband speaks solely in Mandarin to him. And I do know I saw some of the comments that a lot of you had. You were saying that sometimes it didn't materialize, sometimes it just didn't work out. And we found out personally, it's all about consistency and the discipline. And sometimes, for us, it's easier to just speak in English. We get our message across, and it's just quicker, right? With toddlers, you just want to get things done and you want to move on to the next activity. But it's just all about discipline and being consistent. And I find that is actually one of the key ways to ensure, because at the start, it may seem like the child doesn't understand anything because they don't respond, they are not able to verbalize, but all this internalizing the language is actually there, and at a certain age, everything will just come about. They are able to actually follow instructions even before they are able to speak. So actually the children are learning along the way. Yeah. So we'll move on to the next question. What are the methods to enthuse a child to speak Mandarin in a household where neither of the parents speak the language? So for example, if you don't speak Mandarin at home, maybe you're from a Malay family, from an Indian family, but you want your child to speak Mandarin and neither of you speak a Mandarin at all. Don't be discouraged if you do not speak the language you would like your child to pick up on. It won't be an easy task, but there are tips in helping your child get the right exposure to the language. So it's important to introduce the language early, because we all know that children are like sponges, right? They take in a lot of information and be able to pick up skills at a very early age. But if you don't speak it, it's also good. You can tap on technology or the resources that you can find online. So listen to the songs or audio stories will also help. It's also important to find a social community who speak the language. So it's not just dependent on you to give the exposure. Finding parent groups who are interested in play dates or social activities for children over the weekend now that, the measures are a bit more relaxed. And also finding a school that supports this bilingual education that you would like for your child. Because children spend a long time at school, and having a teacher who speaks the language exposes your child to the language constantly on a daily basis. And it's something that even I, as a parent, or my husband struggle a lot with, because you don't have that discipline, you don't have that consistency. But when you do send them to school, there is that consistent language and exposure there. So it's also wonderful if, parents, you jump on the bandwagon and you also learn the language along with your child. So you don't have to be a fluent speaker, but learning the basics will show your child the effort that you are making. So we have had a pair of Irish twins who started with us at about three years old, and they started taking Mandarin as their second language. And they proceeded to head on to a local primary school where they, up to this age, I think they're about P3 or P4, they are still taking Chinese as the second language. So it's amazing because you would see them with blonde hair, blue eyes, and speaking fluently in Mandarin. And it's just such a testament to how important the environment is. Yes, the attitude for learning depends on individual children, but the exposure and the impact that the teachers have on the children is so important. And I was very encouraged by the mom who actually decided to take on Chinese lessons on the side, not to become a fluent speaker, but to actually help children, to support them, and to actually show them that she's also willing to take that step in learning. Yes, I hope that answers your question.
Okay, adding on to what Nat has shared earlier, aligned to what one of the questions that were raised in the chat room, we are English Malay speaking family, how to assist our kids to pick up Mandarin. Another way would be work closely with the teachers. So for instance, the Chinese teachers could have shared with you certain songs or certain rhymes that the children showed interest in the classroom or in the experiences. So with the consistency and alignment from school to home and home to school, it will help the child to pick up Mandarin. So we have worked with families, for instance, who take a keen interest in learning and picking up Mandarin a little bit more, despite they are probably like yourself, English Malay speaking family. The songs, the suggestions coming from the teachers have helped them a lot. So despite families may not be able to understand, but children will be able to continue to connect with the positive experiences in school at home. So then from then on, for as simple as the songs, the parents will also learn the songs or even groove with the children. And that's when there's a continuity of learning the Mandarin from school to home and vice versa. Yeah, we hope that have answered your questions as well. Okay, so the next one. Okay. So at present, children speak English and Chinese. Is it recommended to learn a third language at the age of 4? I will recommend that you can continue to introduce that language, the third language, at the age of 4. But of course, you need to observe closely if your child is receptive about it. For instance, if she needs a little more time to pick up Mandarin, for instance, then if let's say he or she still needs a little more time to pick up Mandarin, then I would suggest to take it slow, before you introduce the third language. I used to teach a child whose family strongly believe in speaking only Cantonese since young, and he speaks 3 languages fluently by the age of 4. So it really takes time, and this day-to-day conversation, like we shared earlier, will really help the children to pick up the interest as well. So it is okay to learn the third language at the age of 4, but you have to go slow and observe your child's interest. Yeah. Okay.
I think we have a question in the chat. Let's quickly read it out. We are Chinese spoken families who are living in Australia, relocated from Singapore, and the little one is exposed to full English environment 5 days a week at daycare since a year ago. He's just over 2 years old and relatively have a good command of Chinese. we were a bit concerned whether this would restrict his ability in learning English. Based on feedback from educator at school, we understand he still prefers expressing himself in Chinese at school. Shall we continue using Chinese primarily at home? So in similar contexts, we do have families who predominantly also speak Chinese and have relocated to Singapore. And in Singapore, we do use English and Mandarin as a language. And sometimes children will definitely have a preference for a certain language over another. And I do believe that because you have that constant exposure in speaking Mandarin all this while, it will be quite hard for the child to instinctively just switch back to English when he's speaking to the parents at home. Children are, they are very aware. If they have been speaking to you in English all this while, it will be another step for them to speak in a different language to you. Likewise, when speaking Mandarin to an English teacher in school, the children will be like, why are you speaking to me in Mandarin? So I would say that you can continue speaking Chinese to him at home so that it's less confusing or there's not too much changes for him. But try to have different activities where you are able to do it in a second language like English at home. So as shared earlier, you could do if he likes to go outdoors, you can plan something around Chinese English activities, setting up for play dates and different social groups as well, so that it alleviates the pressure for you to speak in English to the child, because the children can also feel that it's not parents' primary language, and you might feel like you add a bit more pressure on your child. So it's good to tap on the community that you have and the resources that you have. So instead of changing your language entirely, the way you communicate with him, maybe pick up pockets of different times. So maybe before bedtime, a few times a week, you can read an English book with him. Yeah. Anything to add, Suai?
Yeah, so I don't feel that yourself are restricting him to his ability to learning English. So to begin with, he has already showed a great interest in picking up language, which is now a good command of Chinese. So go on through like we mentioned earlier, through the different opportunities, the storybooks, the play date that Natalie mentioned, or work closely with the teachers as well. Like I mentioned or suggested earlier, if there are any more activities that you can bring from school to home, so that the children will see a connection in learning from school to home, that will help to establish that interest as well. Yeah. Okay, so let's see.
I have one more question that came to me. Sometimes I speak Mandarin to my child, but he still replies in English. How do I get him to speak Mandarin then? Can I understand a bit more about how old your child is, and what other languages do you speak with him at home, since you say that you speak to your Mandarin sometimes?
Hello, yeah, I speak English to him, so it's just English and Mandarin only.
Okay.
He is 4 this year.
Okay. So as mentioned, when we have been speaking English to our children and we switch a language, children sometimes can feel a little bit out of place, because I do not know why my mom is suddenly speaking to me in Chinese all of a sudden. So I think instead of adding that pressure on the children, as any parents would, sometimes you just want to encourage and you just say, why don't you just say it? Why don't you just say it? Sometimes it actually adds a little bit of subtle pressure on the children, and it makes it very awkward. Like it's a bit of like performance anxiety, right? You have to say it there and then. I know you can do it. Why didn't you say it? So I think if your child is actually withdrawing in terms of wanting to speak the language at home, again, let us relook at the way that we approach the language. Why do we want the children to speak at home, and what kind of different activities and ways we can encourage them to use the language? So it could be doing different games or doing different activities, or you can even set a schedule for that day, because if he's 4, he will be able to understand a schedule, right? So when you actually speak with your child and say that, hey, you know what about making Tuesday night dinners, a Chinese night, and we will only make it into a game and only speak in Mandarin, or we can prepare dinner or set up table and we only speak in Mandarin. So take it off the pressure of yourself and putting him in a spot to actually respond in Chinese or in Mandarin, but make it a whole family a game, where maybe the other siblings or maybe your husband can also speak to him in Mandarin, or if you are having a dinner with other people, like make it into a game. So I think it's the initial phase where children are trying to recognize that, I can also speak in dual languages to my parents. I think they just need to get over that hurdle before they actually are able to use that language more naturally. Okay.
I have one question sent directly to me as well. So for non-Chinese children, when they apply to take up Mandarin as second language in primary 1, will they be required to perform any tests to assess their compatibility? What I last know, I'm not too sure whether if they are required to perform any tests, but I do understand and I hear from families that the parents can choose to take the subject or not. But on these notes, something that your families may have to consider carefully. So for instance, let's say upon discussion with the teachers that, oh, your child is able to speak in Mandarin very confidently, able to converse very confidently, but you need to also consider primary 2, primary 3, primary 4 onwards, because the language may get a little more complicated. And there are once in a while I have met with one family, probably at P3 or P4, the child struggles because the language gets a little, the expectations of Mandarin is very different by P3, P4, P5. But there are very little support from at home in terms of application of what he has learned in primary school. So on this note, is something that you need to reconsider or consider properly with your family to see how we can better support, and how sure are we to support your child to take up Mandarin in primary school for non-Chinese children. Yeah. Okay, you may have to connect with the primary school admin to find out a little bit more as well, if they will need to require to perform any tests. Yeah. Okay, anything else to add on, Natalie?
No, I think you have covered it.
Okay.
Do you have any other questions from anybody? You can unmute yourself or you can type it in the chat.
No. Okay, so then that's all we have the time for today. So apologies if we couldn't get to your questions. We hope you have a better understanding of bilingualism after our sharing. So please take a minute to complete the feedback form so that we can tailor the subsequent webinars to your concerns. The link is being shared in the chat right now, or you can scan the QR code for the feedback form. Okay, I'll give you a little while. Okay, while you're trying to get to the form, thank you very much for joining us today and give us your lunch hour, your precious lunch hour. We will have the recording sent to you by email if you would like to listen to it later, or share it with your friends. So we have lots of information in our parenting section on our website as well. Excuse me. It's parenting.etonhouse.edu.sg. So if you want to sign up for our parenting webinars or access our ebooks, podcasts, etc., and all the things about parenting, including bilingualism, yeah. Okay, so thank you again to join us during your lunchtime. Anything from you, Nat?
No, thank you, everybody.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you.